The late Tom Clancy is an important person to the video game industry. The man started writing popular military fiction and espionage novels in the mid-80s, with some being adapted into well-known films, such as The Hunt for Red October and Patriot Games. In the late 90s, Clancy founded Red Storm Entertainment, with the purpose of creating games that, like his novels, are military espionage thrillers, with great attention to realism. And so the Tom Clancy brand was born, from a vision of an author who saw potential in a medium that was still pretty much in its infancy, and regarded as toys by the general masses. After a few years, Ubisoft would buy Red Storm Entertainment, and years later even buy the rights to the Tom Clancy name. Ubisoft continued to use the name on several titles, with the Division currently being the latest addition to the brand. It's also the first new IP that carries the name after Clancy's passing on the 1st of October 2013, mere months after the game's reveal. As time went on, titles under the Tom Clancy umbrella started to stray away from the realism elements, to the point that most games lost that element entirely, making it hard to determine what the brand name is supposed to embody, even more so now after the man's passing. The Division certainly falls on the more fantastical spectrum under the name, but does that mean it's not worthy of it? And more importantly, is it actually good?
Thank you, not gonna lie, it's good to know you're out there.
We might even be your friends.
But when we get the call,
We leave everything behind.
we are.
The Division.
During the 2015 Black Friday craze, a mad scientist spreads his mutated smallpox virus in New York through contaminated dollar bills. This dollar flu quickly spreads over the entire world and reaches an apocalyptic scale. Cities get quarantined, and many are under martial law. Being the source of the outbreak, New York City is also quarantined, and seems to be the worst off, with what little is left of society seemingly collapsed. This is where the Strategic Homelands Division kicks in. The Division is an American military task force of sleeper agents that are activated when order needs to be restored. You are the second wave of Division agents, who are sent into New York to restore governmental control, along with finding out what happened to the first wave. There's no real main narrative until the near end. Instead, all missions are small episodes that either explain a bit of the virus's history, getting the city's power up and running, or focusing on one of the criminal factions and their plans. There's the Cleaners, who believe in cleansing the city by burning anything and anyone who's infected. The Rikers, which are escaped convicts from the titular prison island. And the LMB, which is a private military corporation, whose leader thinks he can bring back order to the city with an iron fist. The leaders of these factions get some background history and an introduction, but their actual antagonizing is minimal, as most of the leaders get killed only 1 or 2 missions after their introduction. The characters are never given the time for players to build a relation with them. Later missions still feature these factions, but the death of their leaders seems to have no effect on them or their plans, making the plot lack cohesion. Most interactions you'll have with other characters is mainly done by them barking orders at you through your communication device. There's Agent Lau, who early on gets decommissioned and acts as a home intelligence and will be accompanied by one of the 3 wing commanders depending on what type of mission you do. Every district also has their own officer, who will provide you with info when you do missions in their district. The main cast just serves as a means to explain the plot or mission objectives, and like the faction leaders, never fully develop as characters. The district officers are all two-dimensional, with each officer having their own character trait that's meant to be lighthearted and funny, but instead falls flat on its face. Aside from the district officers' stereotypical and sometimes annoying personas, the writing ranges from fairly well written,
Just don't like the idea of throwing you to the wolves.
Captain, we are the wolves.
to trying too hard.
You know, they say a pessimist is a disillusioned romantic. Well, whoever said that's a fucking asshole.
Scattered throughout New York are tons of phones, laptops, files, and other stuff that show players a glimpse of what was transpiring during and after the fall of the city, from several people's lives. A lot of audio files offer small narratives, presented in several parts, though sometimes it doesn't really have anything to do with the events that transpired, and while most manage to deliver, there are quite some that miss the mark. Agents can also find pages of a survival guide, which is simultaneously used by one of the survivors as a diary. The writing of the survival guide is confusing and overwritten, and added with the hassle of trying to read any text with the finicky text scroll makes it downright annoying to read. Lastly, there are echoes, which function as neat little holographic dioramas, which allow you to literally walk through the events that transpired on that very spot. While some of the extra side narrative is well done, nothing of value is on offer here as far as main narrative goes.
Just put it down and we'll both pretend this never happened. Hard to believe you can't find good help in the middle of a pandemic.
The Division is a loot-driven third-person shooter with RPG elements. Aside from being a mouthful, it means that the main focus will be leveling up and getting better gear. You have a primary and secondary weapon slot, both of which can be equipped with one of several weapon types. There are the standard assault rifles, short and long range shotguns and marksman rifles, the small and compact submachine guns, and machine guns with a high ammo clip and power. There is also a third weapon slot, reserved for sidearms. Weapons can be outfitted with attachments, which can boost certain stats and makes weapon handling better. Instead of picking a class with certain attributes, players can equip 2 skills and a super ability from any tree if they unlock the desired skill from it. All skills are useful and fun to use, from a pulse which highlights nearby enemies, to a medigun, and even a turret. Skill mods are upgrades to skills, allowing them to be more effective or add another effect to them. Each skill has 3 mods, but only one mod can be equipped on one skill at a time, and fully upgrading a wing unlocks the master mods, which are permanently equipped alongside another skill mod. There is 1 super ability per tree, and these are very useful skills that can turn a dire situation around. This allows players the freedom to create any type of character they want. A previous patch also added the ability to create loadouts that save weapons, skills, and gear, which lets you switch to what's appropriate to the situation on the fly. The base of operations is where agents will spend most of their time when not shooting and looting, allowing them to buy items, craft weapons and gear, and a myriad of other things, depending on what sections of that wing they upgraded. There is a medical, security, and tech wing to improve. All 3 rings have 10 upgrades, and unlocking an upgrade nets you a perk and a skill, or a talent. A neat little touch is that these upgrades not only give agents new options, but it's also justified in universe by linking the skills to certain equipment or departments. Upgrading wings is not done with the regular currency, but with points agents get by completing story missions or encounter missions of the corresponding wing. There are also side missions, but most of these feel like more padding rather than fleshed out interesting side content, and some are just encounter missions minus the benefits. This being an open world Ubisoft title means it's also infused with open world Ubisoft elements. Every district has a safe house, which essentially functions as towers, that when entered unlock the missions in that district and act as a shop and a spawn point when killed. Almost all systems the game uses have been done before, and while it's serviceable, it doesn't make the Division stand out system-wise. Gameplay fares a bit better. The Division is a fair bit harder than most third-person shooters out there right now. Enemies can down you pretty quickly, soak up bullets like no other, and guns have high recoil and bloom, so controlled bursts are essential to optimize effectiveness. A dodge and melee button complete your moveset, but the melee is useless and will hardly come in handy. While the systems are standard fare, the level design is a whole different deal. Story missions feature some extraordinarily well designed areas in which the players will have to engage enemies in. When players arrive at a combat section, they will always have a clear view of the entire area, and enemies aren't aware of the player until they start shooting or run into their line of sight. This gives you ample opportunity to plan out your moves or allows you to get a better vantage point on the enemy. And when the fighting begins, the areas can feel like playgrounds, not unlike Resident Evil 4 handles its level design. There are hidden routes to take, flank and choke points, sniping spots, you name it. It makes combat areas so much fun to fight in, and allows you to plan out different strategies, instead of just throwing yourself at it until you finally get through. Sadly, agents don't have silent takedowns or other stealth options, as it would not only have been a perfect fit but the lack of these mechanics stand out like a sore thumb. Another lamentable thing is that the AI isn't smart. While this normally doesn't mean the end of the world, it does present a problem here. Because the levels are designed in the way they are, they're incredibly fun to fight on. But since the AI's only strategy seems to be throw grenades, hide, and run at you, it promotes overly defensive play, which means bunkering down and not moving from your position is often the easiest way to get through. It really feels like a waste of greatly designed levels sometimes. While the combat areas are great, story missions' level design outside the areas feel very artificial. There aren't any fights outside the combat areas. So when players are done with the battle, they walk through some scenery before coming across another battlefield, with not a single enemy to fight between these areas. It doesn't feel organic, makes for an uneven pacing, and makes the player acutely aware they're playing the game. Just a grunt or two in a hallway could make all the difference. The game would have been better off if it was a linear experience. Not only because of the level design, but also because the game doesn't optimize on any of its open world elements. The encounters on the street just feel like busy work, and after a while, so do the encounter missions. It feels like the Division has shown its hand midway through the game, with the exception of the story missions. These problems sadly can't be ignored, since you will have to level up in between story missions to stand a chance in the next mission. In the beginning this goes fairly fast, but as the leveling takes longer, the less enjoying it becomes to deal with the side content. Also, be prepared for a lot of running. There can be long stretches where you will just be running to the next waypoint with little to do. While the open world is a bust, the Division has one more ace up its sleeve. The middle districts of New York are the Wild West, where anything can happen. Friendships are formed and broken on the drop of a needle, and amazing loot can be lost just as fast as it can be obtained. Welcome to the Dark Zone. If the story missions are meticulously designed and scripted structure, then the Dark Zone is sporadic and glorious chaos. When the player picks up loot in this zone, it needs to be decontaminated. And in order to do that, you will have to call in a helicopter from certain points on the map to extract your gear. And should you die, you will drop the stuff you collected and have to recollect it. That is, if another player hasn't picked it up already. See, in the Dark Zone, other Division players will roam around, looking to score some high number loot, just like you do. You can choose to work together, or you can kill other agents and steal their stuff. But in doing so, you will put a price on your head, which all other agents will be more than happy to collect. The Dark Zone dumps any notion of narrative-driven content in favor of having the player create their own stories. Players will leave with their friends, talking about the events they had like it was a night out of town. Or you might recall to other people alluring tales of this intense and comedic adventure you had in the zone. This mode certainly is the most interesting and unique content the game has to offer, and it's incredibly engaging. Lastly, there are incursions, which are tough as nails endgame missions that are short but require you and your team to coordinate at their best. Whilst most of the game is standard course for Ubisoft games, it's still enjoyable, with the main missions as level designs and the Dark Zone being the exceptional highlights of the game.
You're gonna have EMP bursts headed your way? They can get their hands on our tech. We've got to take out that launcher. But if they're armed with Division gear, it's gonna be a whole new ballgame.
New York is perhaps the most famous city in the world. Its bustling streets and monolithic skyscrapers have been the backdrop of countless of stories. And with games, that's no exception. While a lot of games create their own fictional megalopolis, they wear their inspiration on their sleeve. So if you want to explore the Big Apple through the interactive medium, there's certainly no lack of options. The Division has rough competition when it comes to the location it chose, but there are some things of note here. Firstly, the entire epidemic happened during Black Friday, and while Christmas has passed, decorations and lights are still everywhere and once created a warm and cheerful atmosphere, but are now haunting monuments to the past. This New York is set during a harsh and cold winter, so snow is everywhere, and of course a lot of the city is in an apocalyptic state, with abandoned cars, broken windows, and mostly pure silence. It's a take on the city that never sleeps that's not been done that much before. Authenticity to the layout of the city is also a nice bonus, even if it's a scaled down and abridged version. While it has a lot of landmarks like Times Square, at Madison Square Park, it's missing a certain je ne sais quoi admirers of the city might be looking for. The Dark Zone does a bit better in this regard, with a lot of landmarks leaving a considerable impression. Residents and people familiar with the place will get a kick out of recognizing certain spots, even if they cut out a few streets between them. For the most part, the game keeps its technology grounded, except when it's dealing with anything Division related. Orange is the name of the game, and it's absolutely everywhere. All the Division tech like echoes, a lot of the UI, and even the tech on your character use orange and blue as the main color palette. While blue is the color of this generation, the orange makes things look somewhat distinct. Your character can be customized with clothing pieces they can obtain through various means. These pieces of clothing are purely cosmetic and don't add any stats to your gear, so you can wear whatever suits your style. Unlike most games, the Division doesn't have crazy elaborate clothing pieces, instead opting to go for a plethora of sometimes fairly similar looking but stylish outfits. As far as graphical fidelity goes, the game looks good enough. Fire and particle effects can look really good, and some areas are lighted beautifully, giving players an occasional moment to appreciate the Division on a technical aspect. Faces are a bit weaker, but they're not bad, and considering the game doesn't focus on characters, it doesn't affect much. Ola Strand did some exceptional work on the music. The soundtrack consists of a mix between the all too familiar Hollywood-inspired tracks, but combined with unique sounding synth tracks that fit the military tone while still standing out. The Division has an interesting but unmemorable take on New York, but sometimes it manages to impress. For the most part, The Division is your run-of-the-mill, flavor du jour, open-world Ubisoft game. It has an interesting premise but barely any plot, and the narrative side content ranges from well-delivered and fairly interesting to overwritten and dull walls of text. The systems and mechanics on offer are things you've seen before, and the game does nothing new with them. Same with the open world, which isn't capitalized on in any way. Level design and main missions themselves are exceptionally well done, giving players fun terrains to mess around in, and the Dark Zone is also the game's biggest strong point, with its uneasy alliances and sudden betrayals, making most trips to the zone one to remember. Graphically, the Division looks nice, and sometimes even manages to impress in some areas. The snowy, Christmas-decorated and desolate streets are a unique look for the capital of the world, but not many areas are truly memorable outside of a few areas in the Dark Zone. The Hollywood with synth-infused soundtrack works perfectly with the game. The Division won't knock your socks off, but if the problems in Destiny or its sequel bother you, or you're looking for some more loot-based games, The Division might be something worth putting some time in.
That should do it, Agent. Solid work.
Alright, I'm finally done with this one. This one took a lot of time. Considering the fact that half of the footage was lost when my laptop was stolen, it meant I had to go back and re-record, which meant I had to spend a lot more time with the game that I might have been willing to. This entire thing just kind of felt like a drag. I wrote the review months after I finished the game, and then waited months to fucking voice record and so forth and so forth. So it took a long time for me to actually finish it. And at first I wasn't really too happy with the results. I felt like specifically in the gameplay segment I kind of rambled on a bit, which I still feel is true for the most part. But after a lot of re-recording and messing around with scenes, putting them in different spots, I think I really cleaned up a lot of the review because, yeah, like I said, I'm not too 100% convinced about this review. I was willing to re-record the gameplay segment all over again, just write a new script for the gameplay segment. But after showing it to a few people who said it was good enough, even though I disagreed, I said, hey, let's not mess with it. At least not too much. But yeah, I'm glad this is done. First review of the year. Also, first first Tom Clancy review, which is cool. But yeah, if there's anything you want to say, if you want to let me know about anything Division related or otherwise, you can always message me or leave a comment, and I'll see you guys at the next review. Goodbye.